the DepEd made an order, number 31, about this compulsory sexuality education. The word compulsory means mandatory. The word compulsory means it must be done. And anyone who violates this order can be penalized. We have declared in our Constitution that, and let me be very clear about this, the separation of church and state shall be inviolable. Section 6, Article 2. The free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and worship without discrimination or preference shall forever be allowed. With emphasis, Mr. Speaker, shall forever be allowed. Section 5, Article 3. The state recognizes the vital role of the youth, that includes the adolescents, in nation building, and shall promote and protect their physical, moral, spiritual, intellectual, and social well-being. Why would the framers of our Constitution include the word moral and spiritual? Mr. Speaker, Section 13, Article 2. All educational institutions shall what? Shall strengthen ethical and spiritual values. I do not find the use of contraceptive pills being learned by the adolescents. The use of condoms, Mr. Speaker, as ethical and spiritual values, or develop moral character and personal discipline. Section 2, Article 14. And of course, the right of its spouses to be found a family in accordance with their religious convictions and demands of responsible parenthood, according to Section 3 and Article 15. Notwithstanding these unequivocal declarations in our Constitution, the Department of Education is doing its utmost best to implement what I respectfully submit as unconstitutional, immoral, detestable, a comprehensive sexuality education which is taken from and inspired by foreign, self-centered, situation-based, fashion-inspired, and society-dictated secular thinking which is sex-based, like the UNESCO. Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, why do we always have to entertain Western culture when we have, as Filipinos, our own, Mr. Speaker? Why don't we, just like what the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Sereno, declared, to put up a Filipino sexuality education, of which I believe is no longer needed, as long as the parents and the government and the educators and all churches bond themselves together to protect the moral values, the spiritual, intellectual, and social well-being of our adolescents. And therefore, in this privileged speech, I am calling on all the parents who love their own children. I am calling on all the churches of whatever affiliation, of whatever religion that believe in moral values, and spiritual values, to band themselves with our government so that we can teach our adolescents what is proper and what is spiritually right, Mr. Speaker. I'm calling on all of them right now. As worst, the worst thing is this: as desired by DepEd, and which finds support in legislative measure pending consideration, this curriculum applies to all learners of public and private elementary, junior, and senior high schools. Includes core topics and subtopics across grade levels from grade 4. In fact, they are now teaching it on grade 3 also, such as sexual and reproductive body, sex and marriage, romantic relationships, sexuality and sexual life cycle, and sex and sexual behaviors, among others. That is in the core topics and subtopics CSE order number 31. Are these needed for our adolescents to know, Mr. Speaker? Of course not. In a DepEd CSE K-12 curriculum, the core messages treat principally, and I would like to emphasize K-12. Nagsisimula po yan sa preschool. Ang core messages treat principally about sexual and reproductive parts of the body, the different effects on boys and girls of the sexual reproductive body and functions, sexuality and sexual behavior, sexual reproduction, sexual and reproductive capacity of men and women, sexual pleasure, and learning how to say yes and no about sexual relationships. Mr. Speaker, my esteemed colleagues, that this comprehensive or compulsory sexuality education violates the above-mentioned provisions of our Constitution. It deprives parents of their natural rights, duties, and responsibilities over their children and their divine mandate to teach them God's principles, according to Deuteronomy 6:7. Train them in the ways of God, according to Proverbs 22, verse number 6. Bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, according to Ephesians 6:4. And control them, 1 Timothy 3:4. Nalalaman ko po, Mr. Speaker, na mayroong mga magulang. Ang sabi po ng PubCom, 10% of them among all the parents are not responsible parents. In fact, binanggit po ng PubCom na ang result ng teenage pregnancy ay nabibigay po doon sa mga adults. Pagka minsan po, ang mismong ama ang may kasalanan. Well, meron po tayong batas, Mr. Speaker, na dapat silang managot. Kahit sila ay magulang, kapag kinilang binayolate ang karapatan, binayolate ang sexuality ng bata, meron po tayong batas na sila ay dapat managot, Mr. Speaker. The CSE promotes sexualization in our education institution and indoctrinate young children of the propriety of sex regardless of age and status, thus destroying and making mockery of morality and moral values that could lead one day to amorality. Ang ibig sabihin po ng amorality, wala na tayong kinikilalang moral or immoral. The CSE teaches young children unrestricted freedom to do anything and everything to their bodies with no more consideration of morality and moral values. The CSE would develop a mindset among our children as young as 4 years old, from one of love of God, of country, and of fellow men, to lust, sexual pleasures, and adventure. And the CSE do not promote the social, moral, intellectual, and spiritual well-being of our youth that the state bound itself to promote and protect. The education of our children must be based and founded on our Constitution as a sovereign country and on the law, instruction, and standard of God in the light of the preamble of our Constitution, and not on what society, the world, or any international organization like UNESCO dictates, or the World Health Organization also. Under the CSE, what kind of leaders would our children be? Will they not also trample upon our sacred fundamental law which declares that the state shall maintain honesty and integrity in the public service and take positive and effective measures against graft and corruption, according to Section 27 of Article 2 of the Constitution, and that public office is a public trust. Public officers and employees must at all times be accountable to the people. Serve them with utmost responsibility, integrity, loyalty, and efficiency. Act with patriotism and justice and lead modest lives. Section 1, Article 11. Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, if we really, in all honesty and all sincerity, would like to protect the moral, spiritual, intellectual, and social well-being of our youth, according to our Constitution, and prepare and mold them in nation building, Mr. Speaker, we should not spend our time and resources teaching them about sexuality that includes the use of contraceptive pills, Mr. Speaker, condom. And of course, one senator said that the word masturbation is not even used, but it is implied, Mr. Speaker. Oh yes, it is not used as a word, but implied. But instead, Mr. Speaker, we should teach them moral and spiritual values in the schools. I have filed a bill in Congress, I think in 2023 or 2022, to include in the curriculum in our schools certain stories in the Bible that would promote good manners and right conduct, that would promote moral and spiritual values, just like what the Bible says, and I quote, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." End of quote. As the lawmaking body of the government, I respectfully move that the House do everything at its own disposal to prevent the implementation of a DepEd's compulsory sexuality education. Or else, I would ask the DepEd to rescind the Order 31 that they made in 2018, Mr. Speaker. Or else, I would go to court and file a petition making it unconstitutional, and perhaps all of the laws that embodies what moral values should be. We should, as a House, with all of the parents here, the fathers and the mothers, the lolo and the lolas here, I pray and ask that we shall be honest and sincere enough to protect our adolescents from the evil teaching of the comprehensive sexuality education or compulsory sexuality education. Rather than preventing teenage pregnancy, Mr. Speaker, we should prevent teenage promiscuity, because by preventing teenage promiscuity, we prevent teenage pregnancy, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to refer